As she began the next part of her performance, a sense of calm settled over her. Her first notes had passed, and she could feel the room listening, really listening, in a way that made her nervousness melt just slightly. She knew the real challenge lay ahead. The melody she had chosen now required precision and emotion, and every note had to convey something from deep inside her heart. She took a deep breath, feeling her fingers rest lightly on the keys, ready to bring the music to life. The first few chords of this section were more confident than before. She could hear the subtle change in the room, a shift from curiosity to quiet fascination. Some faces that had once shown doubt now reflected surprise, and she felt a thrill knowing that her music was reaching them. Her fingers moved with more certainty, gliding across the keys in a way that surprised even her. The hours of practice, the nights spent alone experimenting with melodies, were paying off in this very moment. Every note became an extension of her feelings, and she poured herself into the music, letting it carry her beyond fear and into expression. With each phrase, the melody grew richer. She started to play faster, but not in a rush. Each note had purpose, each pause a breath in the story she was telling. She imagined the scene she wanted the music to evoke: gentle rain falling over a quiet street, the warmth of sunlight on her face, a fleeting moment of happiness that seemed so delicate, yet so powerful. The audience seemed to sense it too. She noticed the way some people leaned forward, their eyes soft with emotion, while others closed theirs, letting the music wash over them. The power of the piano was unfolding, and she was at its center. Some people had been skeptical at the beginning, but as the performance continued, their expressions changed. A few whispered to one another, their voices low but full of admiration. She caught glimpses of children who had been giggling before, now sitting with rapt attention. Their earlier laughter had faded, replaced by an almost invisible awe. It was in these moments, when her music spoke more loudly than her words ever could, that she felt an incredible connection with the room. The piano was no longer just a set of keys. It was a bridge between her heart and everyone watching. The complexity of the melody increased, and with it her focus sharpened. She knew that a single mistake could break the flow, but she refused to let fear control her. Each chord was deliberate, each movement of her hands intentional. Her fingers, once clumsy and unsure, now moved with purpose, almost as if they had a life of their own. The music seemed to guide her, and she followed without hesitation. She lost herself in the sound, in the rhythm, and in the emotions that surged through her. Time seemed to stretch, each second filled with meaning. There were moments when she faltered slightly, a finger missing a note or a chord not sounding quite right, but she quickly adjusted, letting the music continue without pause. She had learned to embrace mistakes, to use them as part of the performance rather than as a setback. In doing so, she discovered a freedom she had never felt before. The audience, now fully absorbed, did not notice these minor imperfections. All they could see was the story her music was telling, the raw honesty and passion that flowed from her fingertips. As the melody swelled, she could sense the emotions in the room rising with it. Some people had tears in their eyes, others wore expressions of pure admiration, and a few even looked stunned, as though they could not believe the talent in front of them. The music had the power to touch them in a way that words never could. She felt a mix of joy and humility, knowing that something she had nurtured quietly at home had grown into something that could move hearts in a crowded room. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, a validation not from praise or applause, but from the silent understanding of those who listened. She allowed herself a brief moment to glance at the audience, noticing how completely engaged they were. Even those who had been skeptical or indifferent before now watched with rapt attention. She realized that her music was doing more than just entertaining. It was shifting perceptions, breaking down preconceptions, and inspiring admiration. This thought fueled her further, giving her courage and energy to continue. She closed her eyes again, letting the music flow naturally, trusting her instincts and her preparation. The melody began to soften, moving into a slower, more reflective section. Her fingers gently caressed the keys, creating a delicate, almost fragile sound. She imagined telling a personal story without speaking, sharing a part of herself that few had ever seen. This vulnerability made the music more powerful. The audience seemed to lean in, drawn to the sincerity and emotion in every note. She could feel the weight of their attention, not as pressure but as connection. The room was no longer filled with strangers. It was a shared space of emotion and understanding. Her mind wandered briefly to the moments before she had come on stage, when laughter and doubt had seemed overwhelming. She remembered the whispering and the smirks, the subtle judgments that had made her hands shake at first. But now, in this moment, those feelings seemed distant and irrelevant. The music had transformed everything. It had given her confidence, a sense of purpose, and a connection that transcended words. The audience no longer saw a girl nervous about playing. They saw a musician telling a story through the piano, and she felt that recognition deeply. As she approached the climax of this part of the performance, the melody became more intense. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision and energy, each note building upon the last. The audience could feel the passion in every chord, the emotion that had been growing from the first timid notes. Some leaned forward in their seats, completely absorbed. The music seemed to fill the entire space, resonating in the hearts of everyone present. She could sense the energy in the room matching her own, a rhythm of shared excitement and wonder. Her hands moved almost effortlessly now, guided by instinct and emotion. She had reached a point where fear had no place, only the joy of creation and expression. Every note was deliberate yet natural, flowing like a conversation between her and the piano, and between her and the audience. She felt alive in a way she never had before, as if the music itself had unlocked something inside her. It was not just skill or practice. It was the truth of her dedication, her love for music, and her courage to share it. When the final notes of this part settled into silence, the room held its breath for a moment longer. People stared, not sure how to respond, as if the music had paused time. Then came the first soft clap, followed by another, and soon the room was filled with genuine, warm applause. She smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and pride, but more importantly, a sense of connection with everyone who had listened. She had started this part nervously, unsure of her ability to captivate the audience, but she ended it knowing she had done just that. She had proven to herself and to them that her music had power, beauty, and heart. Sitting at the piano for a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, feeling the lingering resonance of the notes under her fingers. The audience's reaction reminded her that courage and perseverance could transform doubt into admiration. She felt ready to continue, to share the next part of her story through music, knowing that she had already begun to change minds and hearts. The connection she had created in these few minutes was enough to keep her motivated for whatever challenges lay ahead. She had taken the first steps in turning ridicule into respect, and the journey was just beginning. As she prepared for the next part of her performance, a quiet determination settled over her. The first part had passed, and she could feel the room watching her more closely now. Some faces that had looked doubtful or even amused before were now filled with curiosity. She took a deep breath, letting it flow through her, calming her nerves while fueling her focus. The piano before her was no longer just an instrument. It was a companion, ready to carry her emotions into the room. She placed her hands gently on the keys, feeling their smooth surface beneath her fingertips, and prepared to let the music speak. The first few notes were soft but confident, and the melody began to spread across the hall. At first, some of the audience members were still unsure. A few whispered to one another, casting glances at her as if to confirm that she could keep going. But slowly, their skepticism started to fade. The melody had a way of commanding attention, of drawing people in without demanding it. Each note seemed to float in the air, delicate yet full of emotion. She let herself feel the music, imagining the story she wanted to tell, a story of courage, of persistence, of quiet determination. Her fingers moved more freely now, guided by the hours of practice she had invested. She remembered all the late nights she had spent alone at home, learning the smallest nuances of rhythm and tone. She remembered the moments when her hands had faltered, when a chord had not sounded right, and how she had refused to give up. Now, all that effort was showing, not in perfection alone, but in the honesty of her performance. Every note carried a part of her story, a piece of herself she had never shared with anyone before. As the melody developed, it grew more intricate. The notes danced between highs and lows, weaving a tapestry of sound that filled the room. She could see people leaning forward, their expressions changing from curiosity to admiration. Children who had been giggling at the beginning now sat silently, their eyes wide, captivated by the music. Adults, too, were clearly moved, their faces softening with concentration and emotion. The transformation in the audience was subtle but undeniable. The music was doing more than just entertaining. It was connecting her to everyone in that space, creating a bridge between her heart and theirs. She allowed herself to relax into the rhythm, trusting her instincts and the years of practice that had brought her here. The melody flowed more naturally now, each phrase leading to the next effortlessly. She noticed the quiet gasps and small smiles appearing on faces around her. Even the people who had doubted her at the start seemed to be acknowledging her skill and dedication. She had stepped onto this stage with fear and uncertainty, yet here she was, commanding the room without a word, letting her hands and the piano speak for her. Some notes were delicate and tender, almost as if she were whispering secrets to the audience. Others were stronger, full of confidence and emotion, expressing feelings she had never been able to put into words. She realized that music had this incredible power to tell a story, to convey emotion, and to touch hearts in ways spoken language sometimes could not. She felt herself becoming one with the piano, her fingers moving almost instinctively, guided by emotion as much as by technique. The audience seemed to sense this as well, their attention unwavering. There were moments when the melody demanded precision, and she concentrated fully, letting the music flow but maintaining control. She had learned that small mistakes were part of the process, and rather than letting them shake her, she embraced them, letting the performance continue seamlessly. In these moments she felt free, as if the music were lifting her above the fear and doubt that had once held her back. The audience, now fully absorbed, seemed unaware of any small slips, seeing only the beauty and sincerity in her playing. As the piece progressed, it built in intensity. Her hands flew across the keys with confidence and grace, each chord growing in power and emotion. The audience responded almost unconsciously, leaning in, their breaths held in quiet anticipation. She could feel the energy in the room mirroring her own, creating a shared experience that was almost tangible. The music was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone present, each listener taking their own meaning from the notes she played. She felt a deep sense of connection, a realization that what she had feared most, judgment and ridicule, had no power here. Only the music mattered. In the middle of the performance, she allowed herself a brief pause, a moment to feel the room and the people in it. The silence was profound, almost reverent. She sensed their attention, their admiration, and their surprise at her talent. This quiet moment reinforced her confidence, giving her the courage to continue into the more challenging parts of the piece. She had begun to see that the audience was no longer an obstacle. They were partners in this experience, sharing in the emotions she poured into every note. The melody softened, becoming reflective and tender. Her fingers moved with careful delicacy, creating a sense of intimacy that drew the listeners even closer. The story she was telling through the piano was unfolding in layers, moments of quiet vulnerability, moments of strength, and moments of soaring emotion. The room was fully immersed now, and she could feel the energy of their engagement guiding her through the piece. This was a performance unlike any she had given before, because it was not just about showing skill, it was about revealing herself, letting the music express what words could not. As she neared the climax of this section, the melody became more dramatic. Her hands moved faster but with control, creating tension and release in perfect harmony. Each note carried significance, telling the audience more about her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. She could see the emotions on their faces, and it filled her with a sense of accomplishment and humility. She had taken the risk to be vulnerable, and the reward was this moment of shared experience, this silent acknowledgement that her courage and skill were worthy of respect. The final notes of this part rang out, lingering in the room, and she allowed them to fade naturally, letting the silence that followed speak for itself. The audience seemed to hold its breath for just a moment before breaking into warm applause, their clapping and cheering filling the room with a sense of joy and recognition. She smiled, feeling relief and pride, but also something deeper, a connection with everyone who had witnessed her performance. She had faced ridicule at the beginning, yet here she was, transforming doubt into admiration and respect. Sitting back for a moment, she let her hands rest on her lap, her heart still racing but her mind calm. The room had become a shared space of emotion, a place where music had overcome skepticism and doubt. She realized that her performance was not just about skill or technique. It was about courage, perseverance, and the willingness to share a part of herself with the world. This understanding filled her with a quiet confidence, knowing that she could continue, that her story through music was just beginning, and that every note she played could touch hearts and change perceptions. She took a deep breath and glanced at the audience, seeing the expressions of awe, respect, and even inspiration on their faces. This motivated her to continue, to explore the next layers of the piece with even more depth and feeling. The challenge ahead no longer seemed intimidating. It seemed like an opportunity to share even more of herself, to let the music speak louder and reach further. She had already transformed a room full of skeptics into listeners who truly cared, and that realization gave her courage for the next steps of her journey. She knew that if she stayed true to herself and her music, the rest of the performance could be just as powerful, if not more, than what she had already accomplished. As she moved into the third part of her performance, a sense of excitement ran through her. The audience had already been captivated by the earlier sections, but she knew this part would test her in new ways. The music she had chosen now required both emotion and technical skill. Her fingers would have to move quickly across the keys, each note precise yet full of feeling. She sat at the piano, taking a moment to steady herself, feeling the weight of the room's attention, but also the support that had quietly built up since she first played. The first notes of this section were bold and commanding. She allowed herself to play with strength, letting the music fill every corner of the room. She noticed the subtle changes in the audience's reactions. People were no longer simply listening, they were leaning in, anticipating what would come next. Some faces showed astonishment at her skill, others reflected deep emotion, and a few even had tears glimmering in their eyes. She could feel their hearts connecting with hers, responding to the honesty in her playing. It was a moment of pure communication without words. Her hands moved faster now, gliding across the keys with confidence. She had practiced this piece countless times, but performing it in front of a live audience gave it new life. She felt the music not just in her fingers but through her entire body. Each chord, each rhythm, each melody was an expression of everything she had experienced. The moments of doubt, the nights of practice, the small victories that had built her confidence. She had poured herself into this piece, and now she was living it, allowing every emotion to flow freely. The audience was completely absorbed. The skeptics and those who had laughed earlier were now silent, caught in the spell of her music. She noticed children holding their breath, their eyes wide, trying to understand how someone so young could play with such emotion and skill. Adults were nodding, some exchanging amazed glances, recognizing that this was more than talent. This was courage and dedication manifesting through sound. The transformation of the room was tangible, and she drew energy from it, letting it guide her hands and fingers. As the melody continued, it became more intricate. Her fingers danced over the keys with precision, yet she did not play mechanically. Each note was deliberate, chosen to convey a specific emotion. She imagined painting pictures with sound, scenes of hope, struggle, and triumph unfolding in her mind as she played. The audience seemed to see these pictures too, as if her music had given them a glimpse into her soul. This connection inspired her further, pushing her to pour even more of herself into the performance. She reached a part of the music that was particularly challenging. Rapid scales, complex chords, and delicate transitions required complete focus. Her hands moved with a speed and accuracy that could only come from years of practice and unwavering dedication. She felt her heart racing, but it was no longer fear. It was exhilaration. Every note she played was an affirmation of her skill and perseverance. She reminded herself that mistakes were part of learning and performing, but she felt confident enough that they would not occur, and even if they did, she would continue without faltering. The melody swelled, filling the room with sound that seemed almost alive. The audience responded instinctively, leaning forward, swaying with the rhythm and holding their breath as the music reached crescendos. She could feel the collective heartbeat of the room, a silent acknowledgement of the emotions her performance stirred. The laughter and ridicule from before were long forgotten, replaced by awe and admiration. This was the moment she had imagined countless times alone in her room, and now it was real. In quieter moments, she played with subtlety, letting soft notes linger in the air. These pauses, delicate and intentional, gave the audience space to breathe and absorb the emotion behind each chord. She imagined telling her story through these sounds, the nights she had practiced alone, the moments of frustration and doubt, the small triumphs that had encouraged her to keep going. It was a story not just of music but of resilience, and the audience was beginning to understand it. Her fingers moved with a graceful fluidity, as though they were part of a conversation between her heart and the piano. Each hand spoke its own language, yet they worked together in harmony to tell a larger story. She was aware of the people watching, but she did not let their presence distract her. Instead, she used their energy to fuel her performance, feeling inspired by their reactions, their silent engagement, and the subtle smiles of appreciation that spread across the room. As the piece reached another climax, her hands flew across the keys with precision and emotion. The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the music. She imagined waves of sound moving through the space, carrying with them all her effort, dedication, and hope. The audience was entranced. They could feel the power of her performance as if it were touching them personally. She had never felt more connected to people, more understood without speaking a single word. She continued with a series of rapid arpeggios, each note crisp and clear. Her fingers had become extensions of her emotions, expressing what words could not. The audience responded instinctively, leaning forward, holding their breath, and becoming completely immersed. Even those who had been doubtful or uninterested at the beginning were now captivated, realizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. She could see their eyes widen in amazement, their expressions softening with respect and admiration. In the quieter sections, she allowed herself to reflect, playing with softness and nuance. She felt the weight of the room's attention, but it no longer felt like pressure. It felt like a shared experience, a mutual understanding between herself and the audience. She was not just performing, she was communicating, telling a story that required no words. Each note was a brushstroke, each chord a sentence, each melody a paragraph in the story she had longed to share. Her emotions deepened as she moved toward the final part of this section. The music became more intense, more expressive, and more revealing. She felt a surge of energy and passion, a combination of pride and vulnerability. Every note carried her dedication, her courage, and her perseverance. She could see the audience responding, some nodding in appreciation, others closing their eyes to fully experience the depth of the music. She had reached a point where the music and her emotions were inseparable, flowing together in perfect harmony. The final phrases of this part were powerful yet controlled. She allowed the notes to resonate, letting the room absorb the sound fully. The silence that followed was filled with unspoken emotion, as the audience processed the journey they had just witnessed. Then, one by one, claps began, growing louder and more enthusiastic until the room was filled with applause. She smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief, pride, and humility. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and fear, and now she had transformed it all into admiration and respect. Sitting back for a moment, she allowed herself to breathe and reflect. She could feel the impact of her music on the audience, the silent acknowledgement of her courage and talent. The journey was not yet complete, but she had already achieved something remarkable. She had begun to turn skepticism into awe, ridicule into respect, and doubt into belief. This realization gave her confidence and motivation to continue, knowing that the remaining parts of her performance could be even more impactful. She glanced at the audience, noticing the expressions of wonder and inspiration on their faces. This connection, this unspoken understanding, was the reward she had been striving for. The audience was no longer just observers. They were participants in her story, sharing in the emotions she expressed through the piano. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her dedication and perseverance had created a moment of beauty, emotion, and connection that would be remembered. Taking a deep breath, she prepared to move into the final sections of the piece. The journey was far from over, but she had proven to herself that she could rise above fear and doubt. The audience's admiration and engagement had given her the courage to continue, to explore new depths of emotion and technical skill. She had begun to write her story through music, and she knew that every note she played would continue to inspire, captivate, and connect with those who listened. With renewed determination, she let her fingers rest lightly on the keys, ready to continue the journey and reveal even more of the music within her. As she began the fourth part of her performance, she felt a surge of energy and determination. The audience had already been captivated, and she knew this was the moment to take the music further, to fully express the depth of her emotions. Every note she played carried the weight of her journey, The hours of practice, the quiet moments of frustration, the self-doubt she had overcome, and the courage it had taken to step onto the stage. She placed her hands on the keys, letting them feel the cool surface, and prepared to pour everything she had into the music. The opening notes of this section were bold and expressive, capturing the attention of everyone in the room. She felt the energy of the audience feeding into her performance, giving her confidence and strength. Some faces that had been skeptical earlier were now wide-eyed, captivated by her skill. Children who had laughed at the beginning were now leaning forward, listening intently. Adults were nodding, some exchanging amazed glances, realizing that what they were witnessing was more than just talent. It was dedication and passion brought to life. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, navigating the complex chords and rapid scales that this part demanded. She had practiced these passages countless times, yet performing them in front of an audience made every movement feel alive. The music was no longer just something she played. It was a conversation between her heart and the audience, a story told through sound. Each note carried emotion, every chord expressed her feelings, and the rhythm created a connection that went beyond words. As the melody developed, it grew more intricate. She played with a mix of delicacy and power, letting the softer notes linger in the air while the louder chords filled the room with intensity. The audience was completely absorbed, hanging on every sound. Some leaned forward, eyes fixed on her hands, amazed by the speed and accuracy of her playing. Others closed their eyes, allowing themselves to be carried by the music, feeling the emotions she had woven into every phrase. The room seemed to vibrate with the resonance of her performance, a shared experience between performer and listeners. There were moments of challenge in this section, where the melody demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. Rapid transitions, unexpected pauses, and intricate harmonies required her full attention. Her fingers flew across the keys, moving with a fluidity that seemed almost effortless. She had reached a point where fear and doubt no longer existed. Only focus, emotion, and the music mattered. Every note was deliberate, every pause meaningful, and every phrase told a part of the story she had carried in her heart for so long. The intensity of the music increased, and with it, the audience's engagement. They could feel the energy in the room, the passion that radiated from her playing. The skeptics from earlier were now fully immersed, some with eyes wide in astonishment, others with small smiles of appreciation. Children who had once doubted now looked inspired, understanding that courage and dedication could create something truly beautiful. The music had transformed the room, turning doubt into admiration and ridicule into respect. In quieter moments, she allowed herself to play with softness and nuance. These gentle passages were filled with vulnerability and honesty, revealing a side of her that few had ever seen. She imagined sharing her personal journey through these notes, the struggles, the moments of self-doubt, and the quiet determination that had kept her practicing long into the night. The audience seemed to sense the sincerity in her playing, responding with silent attention, as if they were being led into her world for the first time. As the melody reached another peak, she felt a rush of exhilaration. Her hands moved swiftly, each chord resonating with power and emotion. The audience was entranced, some leaning forward in their seats, others holding their breath, completely absorbed by the performance. She could see the change in their expressions, the amazement, the admiration, and the emotional connection that had formed. This was the moment she had dreamed of, the moment when her courage and talent shone brightest. She continued with intricate arpeggios, each note carefully placed, yet full of feeling. The music created a sense of movement and growth, telling a story of perseverance and triumph. She imagined the journey that had led her here, from quiet practice sessions to this stage, and she let those memories flow through her fingers. The audience responded instinctively, caught in the emotion and energy of the music. She could feel their hearts beating in rhythm with hers, their connection growing stronger with every note. As the section progressed, she allowed herself to explore the full range of the piano. Low resonant notes added depth and gravity, while high sparkling notes brought lightness and joy. The contrast created a dynamic experience, capturing the full spectrum of emotion. She noticed people leaning closer, captivated by the music, and she felt a sense of fulfillment. The audience was no longer just watching. They were experiencing the music with her, feeling every rise and fall, every whisper and crescendo. In moments of stillness, she allowed the music to breathe, creating space for reflection and emotion. These pauses were as powerful as the louder passages, letting the audience absorb the journey they were on together. She imagined telling her story through these silences, the challenges she had faced, the doubts she had overcome, and the determination that had carried her forward. The audience seemed to understand, responding with quiet attention, fully engaged in the story she was telling without words. Her confidence grew as the piece continued, each note reinforcing her connection with the audience. She felt a sense of empowerment, knowing that she had transformed the room from doubt and mockery into admiration and respect. Her fingers moved effortlessly, guided by instinct and emotion, expressing everything she had wanted to share. The music was alive, and she was its voice, telling a story of perseverance, courage, and the beauty of following one's passion. As she approached the climax of this section, the music reached its most intense and expressive point. Her hands moved with speed and precision, yet every note was filled with feeling. The audience was fully absorbed, some with eyes wide, others closing their eyes to fully experience the emotion. She felt a wave of exhilaration and pride, knowing that her courage to play despite ridicule had led to this moment. The music was no longer just for her. It was a gift to everyone listening, a shared experience that would stay with them long after the performance ended. The final notes of this part were powerful and deliberate, resonating in the room and leaving a lingering sense of awe. The audience held its breath for a moment before breaking into enthusiastic applause, some rising to their feet in recognition of her talent. She smiled, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and humility. She had faced doubt and ridicule, yet she had transformed those feelings into a performance that inspired admiration and respect. The connection she had created with the audience was profound, a testament to the power of courage, dedication, and music. Sitting back for a moment, she allowed herself to breathe and reflect on what had just happened. The audience's response was more than she had hoped for, a recognition of her skill, perseverance, and the story she had told through the piano. She realized that this journey was not just about music. It was about courage, resilience, and the ability to transform doubt into admiration. Every note she played had contributed to that transformation, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She glanced at the audience, noticing their expressions of wonder, respect, and inspiration. This connection, this shared experience, was the true reward of her performance. She had turned ridicule into acknowledgement and skepticism into awe. The journey was not yet complete, but she knew that the next part of the performance would continue to build on this moment, revealing even more of her talent, emotion, and story. With renewed focus and determination, she prepared to continue, ready to let the music carry her and the audience further into the story she had so carefully crafted. The final part of her performance began with a deep breath and a sense of calm confidence. She had already passed through the stages of doubt, ridicule, and admiration, and now she felt fully connected to the piano, the music, and the audience. Every note she was about to play carried a story, not just of the melody itself, but of the journey she had taken to reach this moment. She placed her fingers on the keys and let the first notes flow, gentle yet deliberate, drawing the listeners back into the emotion of the music. The opening phrases were soft, almost introspective, allowing the audience to reflect on the journey they had shared with her through the earlier parts of the performance. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, each note filled with feeling. She imagined telling the story of perseverance through sound, the nights of practice, the frustration when notes did not come out right, and the quiet determination that had carried her forward. The audience seemed to sense her vulnerability and strength, their focus unwavering as the music enveloped them. As the melody developed, it grew richer and more complex. She allowed herself to play with both power and subtlety, moving seamlessly between soft, tender passages and bold, expressive chords. Her hands seemed to move on their own, guided by the emotion in her heart and the story she wanted to tell. The audience was captivated, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes to fully experience the music. The connection she had built with them over the previous parts now deepened, creating a shared emotional journey. She reached a section of the piece that demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. Rapid scales, intricate chords, and delicate transitions required complete focus. Her fingers moved with speed and accuracy, yet each note was expressive, never mechanical. She drew energy from the audience, feeling their engagement as a silent encouragement. Their astonishment and admiration fueled her performance, allowing her to transcend any lingering nerves. The room was alive with sound, emotion, and energy, and she felt herself completely in the moment. The music began to build toward a climax, growing more intense and passionate with each note. She imagined the stories she had kept inside her, moments of doubt, moments of joy, moments of quiet triumph, and let them pour into the performance. Her fingers danced across the keys, moving with confidence and fluidity, translating years of practice and perseverance into a language everyone could understand. The audience responded instinctively, leaning forward, holding their breath and feeling every rise and fall of the melody. The music had the power to reach them in ways words never could. Amid the intensity, there were moments of softness and reflection. She allowed the music to breathe, giving space for emotion and connection. These gentle passages were filled with honesty and vulnerability, showing a side of her that few had ever seen. The audience seemed to feel the sincerity in her playing, responding with quiet attention. The pauses between notes carried as much meaning as the notes themselves, creating a dialogue between her and the listeners. In these moments, the performance became more than a display of skill. It became a story, a shared experience of human emotion. The energy in the room continued to rise as the music flowed, seamlessly blending power and delicacy, complexity and simplicity. Her hands moved effortlessly, guided by emotion and intuition. She felt a sense of liberation, a freedom that came from expressing her deepest feelings through the piano. Every chord, every note, every subtle nuance was a testament to her courage, dedication, and love for music. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and fear, and now she was sharing the triumph of perseverance and authenticity with everyone in the room. As the piece approached its final passages, the music became even more expressive. She allowed her fingers to soar across the keys, creating waves of sound that filled the space. The audience was fully absorbed, their emotions mirroring the intensity and beauty of her performance. She noticed the awe in their eyes, the smiles of appreciation, and the quiet tears of those moved by her music. It was in this moment that she realized the full power of what she had achieved. Her music had transformed the room, turning doubt into admiration and connecting hearts without a single word. She played the final sequences with a combination of strength and tenderness, bringing the story of the performance to its natural conclusion. Each note was deliberate, each chord resonant with meaning. She imagined the journey of her life reflected in these final measures. The obstacles she had faced, the hours of practice, the courage to defy ridicule, and let that story unfold through her hands. The audience was silent, fully engaged, as if they were witnessing a moment of magic, something rare and profound that transcended ordinary experience. As the last notes lingered in the air, she allowed them to fade gently, creating a moment of stillness that seemed to stretch time itself. The audience held its breath, savoring the emotion and power of what they had just heard. Then slowly, the silence was broken by a wave of applause, soft at first and then growing louder, until the room was filled with cheers and clapping. Some stood, some wiped away tears, and all expressed in their own way the impact of her music. She smiled, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and deep gratitude. She had turned ridicule into respect, doubt into belief, and uncertainty into triumph. Sitting back for a moment, she reflected on what had just happened. The journey had not been easy, but every challenge, every moment of fear had led to this incredible moment of connection and expression. The audience had witnessed not just her talent, but her perseverance, courage, and determination. She had shared a piece of herself with them, and they had responded with admiration, understanding, and inspiration. The power of music, she realized, lay not just in technical skill, but in the honesty and heart behind it. Looking around, she noticed the faces of those who had doubted her at the beginning, now filled with awe and respect. Children who had laughed were now inspired, realizing that courage and dedication could create something extraordinary. Adults nodded, acknowledging not just her skill, but her bravery in following her passion despite ridicule. She understood that her performance was more than just a moment on a stage. It was a story, a lesson, and a gift to those who had listened. Music had become a bridge between her heart and the hearts of others. With the applause continuing, she allowed herself a final deep breath. Her journey had begun with fear and doubt, had passed through challenge and perseverance, and had reached this moment of triumph and connection. She had faced ridicule, yet she had turned it into admiration through skill, courage, and expression. The experience left her with a sense of fulfillment, pride, and inspiration. She knew that the music she had shared would remain with her audience long after the performance ended, leaving a lasting impression of beauty, determination, and heart. The final moments were quiet and reflective. She let the music linger in her mind, savoring the emotions and the connection she had created. She felt gratitude for the journey, for the courage to continue despite fear, and for the opportunity to share her passion. The audience's response had affirmed her dedication and perseverance, showing that true talent and heart could overcome skepticism and ridicule. In those moments, she realized that music had not only transformed the room, but it had also transformed her, giving her confidence, pride, and a deep sense of purpose. As she slowly stood from the piano, she took a final look at the audience. Their faces were filled with admiration, inspiration, and joy. Some were still clapping, others smiling softly, and all seemed touched by the performance. She felt a warm sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had not only played the piano but had shared a story, an experience, and a part of herself. She had transformed ridicule into recognition, uncertainty into confidence, and doubt into belief. This performance was a testament to perseverance, courage, and the power of following one's passion. With a final nod and smile to the audience, she left the stage, her heart full of emotion and gratitude. She knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, that there would be more music, more challenges, and more opportunities to inspire others. But she also knew that she had proven something important, that courage, determination, and heart could overcome fear and doubt. The experience would stay with her forever, a reminder of the day she turned ridicule into awe and transformed a room full of skeptics into listeners who believed in her and her music. She had found her voice, and nothing could take it away.